The sky had never looked so strange to him. He stood on the edge of a cliff, staring down at the sprawling alien city below, its buildings rising like crystal towers that shimmered in colors he had never seen on Earth. The air was thick with a scent that was both sweet and metallic, making him take cautious, shallow breaths. He had arrived on this planet only a few hours ago, after a mission that was supposed to be simple: observe and report. Yet, nothing had prepared him for what he was about to encounter. The city was quiet in places, but alive in others. From a distance, he could see small creatures, children, he realized, playing in the streets. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. They laughed in high musical voices, and though it sounded joyful, there was an undercurrent of sadness in the way they moved. Something about them tugged at him, a deep sense that they were vulnerable, in need of protection. He had not expected to find children here. His orders were clear: observe the alien queen's court. Record information about their technology and culture, and leave. But fate had a different plan. As he made his way down the cliff path, he stumbled across a scene that stopped him cold. 2 children, no older than 8, were trapped on a broken bridge over a deep chasm. The bridge had clearly suffered damage from some recent storm or attack, and the wooden planks creaked and threatened to collapse. The boy was frozen in fear, one hand gripping the rope railing for dear life. The girl's small body shook, and her luminous eyes were wide with terror. Without thinking, he ran toward them. The wind howled around him, making the precarious bridge sway dangerously, but he ignored it. He called out softly, trying not to frighten them more. "It's okay. I'm here. I'll get you across." The boy looked at him skeptically, unsure if he could trust a stranger. The girl clung tighter to the railing, mumbling something in a language he couldn't understand. But he didn't have time to worry about the language barrier. Every second counted. He knelt down, reaching out his hands to help them. Slowly, carefully, he guided the boy across first, letting the child step on his sturdy boots as he moved. Then he turned to the girl, speaking in the calmest tone he could manage. "I've got you. Just trust me." It took what felt like hours, but in reality was only a few minutes. And finally, both children were safe on solid ground. They looked at him, panting, their eyes wide with awe and relief. He gave them a small smile, brushing the dirt off his sleeve. "You're safe now," he said. He didn't know why, but he felt an inexplicable connection to them. Something in their frightened expressions told him that their safety was now his responsibility. As they walked together toward the city, the children remained close, as if sensing he was a protector. He noticed that their clothes were simple but finely made, a mix of fabrics he couldn't identify. They carried small bags, probably containing what little belongings they had. The girl, braver than the boy, eventually whispered a few words to him. He didn't understand them, but the tone was urgent, almost pleading. He nodded, understanding enough through body language that they needed help getting to the Queen safely. By the time they reached the outskirts of the city, Alien Queen's palace loomed before them. It was enormous, even from this distance, with towers that seemed to pierce the sky. The building shimmered as though it were alive, its surface reflecting light in constantly changing patterns. He had read reports about the Queen in his briefing, but seeing her palace in person was overwhelming. He knew that entering the palace without permission could be dangerous. But the children's frightened glances left him no choice. They needed help, and he was determined to provide it. He led the children to the entrance, where guards stood tall, their armor shining in the dim light. Their faces were expressionless, but their eyes glowed faintly, a warning that they were not to be trifled with. He stepped forward, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. The boy clung to his leg, while the girl took his hand, gripping it tightly. They were terrified, and he could feel the weight of their fear pressing against him like a heavy cloak. One of the guards spoke, a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. He didn't understand the words, but the tone was questioning. He tried to communicate through gestures, showing the children and pointing toward the palace. After a tense moment, the guard motioned for them to follow. Relief washed over him, but he didn't relax completely. Every instinct told him that danger could strike at any moment. Inside the palace, the hallways were vast, lined with glowing panels that emitted a soft ambient light. The children's eyes widened in wonder as they looked around, but their hands remained tightly clasped in his. It was clear that they had been through hardships that were difficult for anyone to imagine. They were not just lost. They were frightened by a world that had already taken so much from them. He felt a surge of protectiveness, a desire to shield them from every possible harm. Eventually, they were brought before the queen herself. She appeared in a grand chamber, seated on a throne that seemed to float slightly above the ground. Her skin was a deep, iridescent blue, and her eyes held the wisdom and sorrow of someone who had endured immense loss. At first, she looked at him with suspicion, her gaze sharp and calculating. But then she turned to the children, and her expression softened, a flicker of hope appearing in her luminous eyes. The children ran to her, throwing themselves into her arms. He stepped back, giving them space, watching as the queen held them close, her tears reflecting the soft light of the chamber. It was in that moment that he understood the depth of her loss. Her grief was tangible, almost suffocating, but it was matched by her love for these children. He had saved them from immediate danger. But their lives were intertwined with sorrow and hardship beyond anything he had ever imagined. The queen finally spoke, her voice calm but resonant, carrying authority and warmth at the same time. He didn't understand the words fully, but he could sense the gratitude in her tone. The children clung to her tightly, looking back at him with a mix of relief and newfound trust. He realized that his actions, simple as they seemed, had created a bond of connection that went beyond language or culture. As the day turned to evening, he stayed nearby, making sure the children were safe and calm. He watched as the queen moved among her children, her grace and authority evident in every gesture. And though he had only just arrived on this planet, he felt a strange sense of belonging. The children's trust in him, the queen's quiet acknowledgement, and the sense of purpose that had awakened within him, all combined to form a feeling he had never experienced before. By the time night fell, he was exhausted, but his mind was alert with anticipation. He knew that his life had changed in ways he could not yet understand. Saving the children was only the beginning. Something larger, something unforeseen was unfolding before him, and he could sense that the queen's attention was no longer solely on her children. She was aware of him, and in ways he could not yet comprehend. His presence had stirred something within her. He sat quietly in a small chamber provided for him, reflecting on the day's events. The fear, the danger, and the uncertainty had all been overwhelming, yet he felt a deep satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, he had made a tangible difference. He had acted without hesitation, and in doing so, he had forged a connection with beings from a world so alien it was almost incomprehensible. And as he drifted off to a light, uneasy sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The queen's gratitude, the children's trust, and the strange, undeniable pull he felt toward this world were all signs that his life would never be the same again. Somewhere in the shadows of this alien planet, a story was unfolding, one that would intertwine his fate with that of the queen, her children, and a world unlike anything he had ever known. The next morning, the alien palace was bathed in a soft, radiant light that seemed to flow through the translucent walls like liquid. He woke in a small guest chamber provided for him, its design unlike anything he had ever seen. The floor was smooth and cool beneath his bare feet, yet it seemed to pulse faintly with warmth. The walls shifted subtly, displaying abstract patterns of light and color that seemed almost alive. For a moment, he paused, staring at them in wonder. Despite the beauty around him, his thoughts immediately turned to the children. He wondered how they were faring under the queen's care. Even though he had left them safely in her arms the night before, he could not shake the worry that something might go wrong. Their faces, the boy's uncertain expression, and the girl's wide, fearful eyes kept appearing in his mind. He felt a strong responsibility toward them, as if their safety was now tied directly to his own sense of purpose. As he stepped out into the palace's main hall, he noticed the queen moving gracefully among her attendants. She was speaking softly, though the sound was strange to him, almost musical, almost like wind passing through glass. Yet the tone carried authority and warmth that transcended language. The children were nearby, playing cautiously under her watchful gaze, occasionally glancing at him. He smiled softly, and the girl waved timidly. He waved back, feeling a strange sense of relief. She had begun to trust him. The queen's attention soon shifted to him. She approached with slow, deliberate steps, her eyes studying him as if she were weighing his intentions, his character. He held her gaze, trying to convey through his stance and expression that he meant no harm. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, more personal, though he still could not understand the words. Yet somehow, he understood the meaning. She wanted to know why he had risked himself for her children. He struggled to find the words. Realizing that no human language could fully explain the depth of his feelings, so he simply gestured toward the children, then to himself, and shook his head gently. It was a small, simple communication, but she seemed to grasp it immediately. Her eyes softened, a flicker of gratitude and curiosity crossing her face. For the first time, he sensed a personal connection forming not just with the children, but with her as well. Over the next few hours, he began learning more about the palace and its inhabitants. He followed the children as they moved through the grand halls, discovering that the palace was filled with wonders and complexities beyond his imagination. Some walls displayed holographic maps of the stars, others depicted scenes from the planet's history. The children seemed fascinated by the technology, and yet hesitant, as if they had grown accustomed to such marvels, but were still wary of the unknown. He took time to observe them, noticing subtle details that spoke of their experiences and personalities. The boy was cautious, always scanning the environment for threats, his small body tensing at sudden movements or loud sounds. The girl, on the other hand, was curious and bold, though her bravery was tempered by a lingering fear. She would approach new objects or creatures hesitantly, touching or studying them with wide-eyed wonder before retreating slightly. Together, they balanced each other, a team shaped by necessity and survival. While the children explored, found himself drawn into conversations with some of the palace attendants. Though their language was foreign, gestures and expressions allowed for basic communication. He learned that the queen had lost her mate in a tragic accident, leaving her to care for her children alone. The weight of her grief was evident not only in her demeanor, but also in the way the palace functioned. Every decision seemed influenced by the desire to protect her offspring. He admired her strength. Despite the tragedy she had endured, she carried herself with a grace that commanded respect. She was not only a leader, but also a mother, balancing authority with love. Her determination to shield her children from the dangers of their world reminded him of the bravery that sometimes went unnoticed in everyday life. It stirred something inside him, a deep respect, but also a growing sense of responsibility to help in any way he could. By midday, the queen called him to a private chamber, a room adorned with shimmering tapestries that seemed to move subtly, reflecting light in patterns that shifted with every step. He stepped in cautiously, aware of the significance of being summoned. She stood in the center of the room, her posture commanding, yet her eyes held a softness he could not ignore. The children peeked from the doorway, their eyes wide with curiosity and trust. This time, when she spoke, her gestures were accompanied by a series of small, glowing symbols that hovered in the air, a form of communication that combined visual cues with sound. He watched carefully, trying to understand. The meaning gradually became clear. She was inviting him to stay close, to assist in the care of her children. It was not a command, but a plea, a recognition of his courage and reliability. He nodded, understanding fully the weight of the request. Helping these children was more than a duty. It had become a moral choice, a decision born of empathy and a desire to make a difference. As he agreed, she allowed a small smile to appear on her lips. It was fleeting, almost shy, but it carried immense warmth. The children, sensing the approval in her expression, approached him without hesitation, holding his hands as if claiming him as their protector. The rest of the day passed in a mixture of activity and learning. He helped guide the children through simple exercises designed to strengthen their skills and confidence. Observing their unique abilities and quirks, they played games that seemed strange to him, but he adapted quickly, learning through imitation and guidance. Laughter occasionally filled the hall, a sound that warmed his heart and eased some of the tension that had built since his arrival. He also began to notice the subtle ways in which the queen watched him. Her eyes followed his every move, assessing, questioning, yet always with an undercurrent of appreciation. He sensed that she was forming opinions about his character, evaluating whether he could be trusted, not only with her children, but also with matters far more significant. Though he did not understand the full extent of her thoughts, the awareness of her scrutiny made him more conscious of his actions. Every gesture, every word, every expression became deliberate. As night fell, the palace transformed once again. The walls glowed softly with ambient light, creating an atmosphere that was both serene and mysterious. The children had gone to rest, exhausted from a day of exploration and guidance, leaving him with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He walked along the balcony that overlooked the city, marveling at the alien skyline. Towers reflected the fading light of the setting sun, and the streets below twinkled like stars scattered across a dark ocean. It was in that moment of solitude that he realized the depth of what was happening. This planet, this queen, these children, they had become more than an assignment. They had become part of his life, entwined with his sense of purpose. Saving the children had been an act of courage, but it had also opened the door to something far greater, a connection that defied the boundaries of worlds, species, and cultures. He knew that the queen had suffered greatly, and that her loss had shaped her into the formidable being she was. Yet he also sensed that beneath her strength lay a vulnerability, a longing for companionship and support. And though it was far too soon to understand the full implications, he felt a growing realization that his presence was not merely convenient, it was becoming essential, both to the children and to her. Returning to his chamber, he sat quietly reflecting on the events of the day. The fear he had initially felt upon arrival had given way to determination, and the uncertainty of his mission had transformed into a clear sense of purpose. He understood that his actions, small as they might seem, carried weight. They had already changed the trajectory of these children's lives, and, in turn, his own. Before falling asleep, he glanced toward the door, half expecting the queen or the children to appear with some new request. But the night remained quiet, the palace serene in a way that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the day. And as he drifted into a light, thoughtful sleep, he felt a growing anticipation. He had saved the children, yes, but this was only the beginning. The days ahead would test him, challenge him, and perhaps transform his understanding of what it meant to protect, to care, and to belong, somewhere deep in the heart of the palace. He sensed the queen watching him. Though he could not see her, could not hear her, he felt the presence of her attention, an unspoken acknowledgement of his bravery and reliability. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it filled him with a quiet confidence. He understood that he was no longer just an outsider. He was part of something larger, something that bridged worlds and hearts alike. And in that quiet night, beneath the alien stars that stretched across the sky like scattered jewels, he made a silent promise. He would protect these children. He would stand by them, guide them, and ensure their safety. And perhaps, in doing so, he would uncover the deeper bonds that awaited him not only with them, but also with the queen, whose path was now inexorably linked to his own. The following morning, the palace was alive with movement. Servants and attendants moved swiftly along the corridors, carrying trays of food, tools, and small devices he could not identify. The children were already awake, their energy boundless despite the emotional events of the previous day. The boy's cautious demeanor remained, but he seemed slightly more confident, glancing toward him for reassurance before attempting anything new. The girl, always curious, had been exploring the corners of the chamber, touching objects and examining them with fascination. He joined them for breakfast, a strange but colorful meal that he could barely recognize. The food was warm and fragrant, with textures that shifted oddly as he touched them with his fingers. The children ate quickly, their eyes darting toward him occasionally, as if seeking approval or guidance. He smiled softly at them, feeling a mixture of amusement and protectiveness. Despite the alien nature of everything around him, there was a simple truth he understood clearly. These children needed stability, guidance, and safety, and he would provide it. Once breakfast was finished, The queen appeared, moving with her usual grace. Today, she carried herself differently. There was a hint of curiosity and intent in her gaze that he could not ignore. It seemed she had made a decision overnight, one that involved him more directly. She gestured for him to follow her into a private chamber, her movements deliberate yet elegant. As if every step were measured to convey authority and calm, the children, sensing the importance of the moment, stayed close by. The girl's hand held his tightly, her trust in him evident in the way she clung. The boy walked cautiously beside them, his eyes scanning the surroundings for potential threats. Together they formed a small, silent unita, human and two alien children, moving carefully through a world that was completely foreign to him, yet somehow becoming familiar inside the chamber. The queen began to communicate in her symbolic language again. Glowing shapes floated in the air, shifting and changing as she spoke. Though he could not understand the words directly, the tone and gestures made the meaning clear. She wanted him to take a more active role in the children's lives, to teach, guide, and protect them, as she could not always be present. There was no command in her request, only a profound expression of trust. He hesitated for a moment, realizing the responsibility that came with her request. These were not ordinary children. They had experienced loss, fear, and uncertainty on a scale far beyond what most humans could comprehend. Their mother, their queen, was entrusting him with something sacred, the safety and development of her offspring. It was a heavy burden, but one he accepted without question. He nodded, making sure to communicate both understanding and commitment. The queen's expression softened, a subtle acknowledgement of his agreement. She stepped back, allowing him to take the lead. The children immediately responded, their trust in him solidifying. The girl clung to his arm, her wide eyes bright with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. The boy, though still cautious, walked beside them with a quiet determination. Following his example and learning from his guidance, the day passed in a series of lessons, exercises, and explorations. He taught them small tasks that were essential for survival and self-confidence: how to navigate the palace safely, how to communicate with attendants, and how to manage fear in situations that could be dangerous. At first, the children struggled. The boy's fear often made him freeze, while the girl's curiosity sometimes led her into precarious situations. Yet with patience, guidance, and encouragement, they began to learn and adapt. He discovered unique qualities in each of them. The boy had an incredible memory and an ability to notice details that most adults would overlook. He could spot patterns and anticipate outcomes, which made him surprisingly capable despite his initial timidity. The girl, on the other hand, had an innate courage and a creative mind. She could find solutions in moments of uncertainty, often taking risks that he would never have considered, yet managing to succeed where others might fail. Together, they complemented each other perfectly, and he marveled at the bond forming between them as the sun reached its zenith. He noticed the queen observing them from a distance. Her presence was subtle, almost invisible, yet he could feel her gaze. There was no judgment, only a careful watchfulness, as if she were measuring his impact, his patience, and his dedication. For the first time, he felt the weight of her scrutiny not as a threat, but as a recognition that his actions mattered deeply to her and to her children. During a brief break, he and the children wandered into a garden courtyard within the palace. The plants were unlike any he had seen, their leaves shimmering with iridescent colors. Some even seemed to hum softly when touched. The children were fascinated, examining every detail, pointing out colors, textures, and shapes. He encouraged their curiosity, asking questions and letting them explore safely. In moments like these, he realized that learning was not just about survival. It was about building confidence, trust, and joy in a world that had often been harsh to them. By mid-afternoon, he noticed the queen approaching again. She moved quietly, yet with a presence that was impossible to ignore. Today, she seemed to carry an air of authority mixed with a personal curiosity. She spoke to him using gestures and symbols, this time conveying something more nuanced. She wanted him to spend more time with her children, to integrate into their lives fully, and perhaps even to understand the deeper emotional needs they had, not just their physical safety. He nodded once more. Protecting the children was no longer a matter of immediate danger. It was about shaping their growth, nurturing their minds, and helping them navigate the challenges of their world. It was a responsibility that required patience, empathy, and resilience. And though it was daunting, he felt a quiet determination. He would rise to the occasion, no matter how difficult or unfamiliar the path might be. The queen then gestured for him to observe the children closely as they interacted. He watched carefully, noting the subtle ways they communicated, comforted each other, and expressed emotions. The boy's cautious nature was gradually giving way to confidence under his guidance, while the girl's boldness became more measured and thoughtful. Each moment of growth felt significant, small victory in the ongoing process of helping them heal and thrive. Evening approached, and the palace was bathed in soft ambient light. The children, exhausted from a full day of lessons and exploration, were finally ready to rest. He guided them back to their chambers, ensuring they were comfortable, fed, and calm. As they drifted into sleep, he lingered nearby, reflecting on the events of the day. Their trust in him was no longer tentative. It was real, earned through consistent care and protection. As he walked back through the palace, felt the queen watching him again. This time, the attention was unmistakable. Her eyes followed him, carrying a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement of his dedication. He could sense the depth of her gratitude and the subtle, almost imperceptible connection forming between them. It was not yet spoken, not yet acted upon, but it was present, an invisible thread linking him to her, their children, in ways he could not yet fully understand. That night, he returned to his chamber and sat quietly, contemplating the day's events. The palace was silent, the children sleeping peacefully. The queen's presence felt like a gentle, constant awareness surrounding him. He realized that the days ahead would not be easy. He would face challenges, doubts, and moments of fear, but he also understood that he was no longer alone. He had a purpose, a connection, a responsibility that transcended the boundaries of worlds and species. As he prepared for sleep, he glanced once more toward the children's chambers, imagining their dreams filled with hope, curiosity, and security. He had saved them from immediate danger, but now he was responsible for guiding them through the complexities of life in this alien world. And though the task was immense, he felt a quiet resolve. He would not fail them. He would protect them, nurture them, and stand by them. No matter what challenges arose, somewhere deep within the palace, he sensed the queen's gaze again. Though he could not see her, her awareness of him was palpable, a quiet recognition of his efforts and intentions. It was subtle, yet it filled him with an unspoken reassurance. He understood that he had become part of something larger, a family, a bond, and a story that transcended the ordinary and ventured into the extraordinary. And as he finally drifted into sleep, he knew that the path ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But one thing was certain: his life and the lives of the children were now intertwined. And in protecting them, guiding them, and caring for them, he was discovering a purpose far greater than he had ever known. The morning light filtered gently through the palace windows, casting a soft glow across the chambers. Today felt different. He could sense it in the quiet energy of the palace, in the way the children moved with renewed confidence, and in the subtle shifts in the queen's attention. The bond he had begun to form with the children was growing stronger, and he could see the impact of his guidance in the way they interacted with each other and the attendants around them. The boy, who had once been timid and hesitant, now approached tasks with cautious determination. He no longer froze at the sight of new objects or unexpected movements. Instead, he observed carefully, asked questions through gestures, and attempted solutions with increasing confidence. The girl, always curious and bold, had started to channel her energy into purposeful exploration, thinking carefully before acting, yet never losing her innate creativity. He watched them with pride, realizing that the trust he had earned was helping them grow in ways that the queen herself could not always achieve. The queen appeared shortly, after breakfast, her movements graceful and deliberate as always. Today, she seemed more attentive to him personally, though still careful to maintain her composure and authority. She gestured for him to follow her into a chamber that was quieter, more intimate than the previous meeting rooms. As he approached, the children followed, sensing that something important was about to happen, but trusting that he would guide them safely inside the chamber. The queen began to communicate with her symbols and gestures. This time her expressions carried an undercurrent of personal concern, something beyond gratitude or acknowledgement. Though he could not understand every detail, it was clear she was observing his commitment to her children closely, and considering how far he might be integrated into their lives, there was a quiet tension in the air. As if the conversation held consequences far beyond the room itself, he realized with a mixture of surprise and humility that his actions were beginning to influence not only the children, but also the queen. Her attention toward him was no longer purely official. It carried curiosity, consideration, and perhaps something he could not yet name. The bond formed through his protection of the children had opened a door, one that connected him to her in subtle, meaningful ways. After the brief meeting, he guided the children into the palace gardens. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of unfamiliar flowers and the gentle hum of alien insects. The garden was an intricate design, full of winding paths, vibrant plants, and shimmering pools. It was a place where the children could explore safely while he monitored them, providing guidance and encouragement. Today's exercise focused on problem-solving and teamwork. The boy approached a small, complex device that looked like a combination of mechanical gears and crystal panels. At first he hesitated, unsure how to interact with it. The girl, ever daring, stepped forward but quickly realized the mechanism was delicate and withdrew. He knelt beside the children, explaining through gestures and simple actions how the device could be manipulated safely. Slowly, carefully, the boy began to operate it, his confidence growing with each successful step. The girl watched intently. Learning patience and observation through example, it was moments like these that he realized the profound impact of his presence. He was not just a protector in times of immediate danger. He was a teacher, a guide, and a source of stability in a world that had often been unpredictable and frightening for the children. Their trust in him was tangible, expressed not only in their actions, but also in their reliance on his judgment and reassurance. As the day progressed, the queen occasionally appeared, observing from a distance. Her gaze was steady, her posture regal, yet he noticed subtle expressions of interest and approval. She seemed to measure his patience, his attentiveness, and the care with which he interacted with her children. Though the language between them was not shared, a silent understanding was forming, a connection built on actions, trust, and mutual respect during a mid-afternoon break. He took the children to a small balcony overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking. Towers shimmered under the alien sun. Distant streets were dotted with tiny, glowing creatures moving in patterns he could hardly comprehend. The boy's eyes widened, scanning every detail, while the girl leaned on the railing, mesmerized by the colors and movement. He encouraged them to observe, ask questions, and think critically. In these small moments, he realized that teaching extended far beyond survival skills. It was about fostering curiosity, understanding, and appreciation for their world. The queen approached quietly, her presence subtle but unmistakable. She did not speak directly to him, but observed, her eyes occasionally meeting his. There was a quiet recognition in her gaze, an acknowledgement that he was fulfilling a role that mattered deeply to her and her children. He felt a strange mixture of pride and humility. Her gratitude was silent, expressed not through words but through attention, trust, and the way she allowed him to interact freely with the children. As evening approached, a small emergency arose. One of the children, the boy, had wandered slightly too close to a reflective pool in the garden, slipping on a smooth surface and nearly falling in. Instinctively, he rushed forward, catching the boy's arm just in time. The child's wide eyes met his, a mixture of fear and relief. He steadied him, offering a gentle smile and reassurance. The girl ran to his side, gripping his hand, her trust unwavering. The queen, who had observed the incident from a distance, stepped closer, her expression softening. This moment crystallized something he had begun to sense but not fully understood. His role had evolved. He was no longer merely an outsider, an observer, or even just a protector. He had become an essential part of the children's world, someone whose presence ensured safety, growth, and emotional stability. The Queen's acknowledgement, though silent, confirmed this shift. He could feel it in the way she allowed him space to act, in the trust she placed in him, and in the subtle way she observed his interactions. Later, back in the palace, he helped the children prepare for the evening. They washed, changed into comfortable clothing, and sat down for a modest meal. During this time, he encouraged conversation, playful interaction, and storytelling. The girl spoke in her musical language, and while he could not understand the words, the tone and gestures conveyed imagination and humor. The boy responded with gestures of his own, occasionally looking to him for confirmation or guidance. It was a simple, joyful interaction, yet it carried profound meaning as the children rested. He found himself wandering the palace halls again, reflecting on the day. The weight of his responsibilities had grown, but so had his sense of purpose and connection. He had saved the children from immediate danger, guided their growth, and earned the trust of both them and the Queen. Each action, each lesson, each moment of patience and care had deepened bonds that transcended language, species, and culture. Before retiring for the night, he paused near a large window overlooking the alien city. Lights twinkled in patterns he could not understand, yet he felt a strange familiarity, as though the city itself were acknowledging his presence. Somewhere in the palace, he sensed the Queen watching him again. Her gaze was subtle, yet powerful, quiet, unspoken recognition of his role, his courage, and his dedication. He understood that his actions were shaping not only the children's lives, but also the dynamics of their family and the Queen's perception of him. He settled into his chamber, feeling the weight of responsibility and the quiet thrill of purpose. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. Challenges awaited, decisions would be difficult, and the unknown stretched before him like an endless horizon. Yet he also understood that he had found a place where he mattered, where his actions had meaning, and where his presence could bring stability, trust, and even hope. As he drifted to sleep, the faint hum of the palace surrounding him, he thought of the children and the Queen. They had all been touched by loss, fear, and uncertainty, yet he had discovered a way to make a difference. The bond formed through his courage, patience, and care had grown stronger, and he sensed that it would continue to develop in ways he could not yet imagine. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, he felt a subtle, unspoken connection with the Queen. It was not yet fully realized, nor was it spoken aloud. But it existed, a thread linking him to her and her children in ways that transcended words, distance, and even worlds. It was a connection born of trust, shared experience, and mutual recognition. And he knew it would guide him through the days ahead. The next morning, the palace felt calmer than usual, as if the world itself had paused to observe the unfolding story within its walls. He woke with a sense of anticipation, a quiet awareness that today would bring something significant. Over the past days, he had become more than a protector to the children. He had become a teacher, a guide, and a source of stability in their lives. But he also sensed that the Queen's perception of him was evolving, moving beyond gratitude and trust toward something deeper, something unspoken yet undeniable. After breakfast, he found the children waiting for him in the garden courtyard, their energy bright and playful. The boy had grown noticeably more confident, taking small leadership roles in the games they played, while the girl approached every new challenge with a balance of boldness and thoughtfulness that spoke of her growth. Together, they were no longer timid, frightened children, but young beings beginning to embrace the strength and courage within them. He guided them through a series of exercises that combined physical agility, problem-solving, and observation. The courtyard was filled with strange, shimmering devices and plants that responded to touch, creating opportunities for learning that were both engaging and challenging. The boy carefully manipulated one of the devices, his hands steady and precise, while the girl observed, ready to step in with a creative solution if needed. He watched them, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. Their progress was remarkable. It was clear that his guidance had made a lasting impact. As midday approached, the Queen appeared. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, and calm, yet there was a subtle intensity in her gaze. She did not immediately address him, but instead observed quietly, watching how he interacted with her children. He noticed the way she studied his expressions, his patience, and his attentiveness. There was an unspoken evaluation happening, yet it was tinged with curiosity, and he suspected something more personal. The children, sensing the queen's presence, paused briefly, but did not retreat. They seemed confident in his guidance, and their trust in him was evident in their calm demeanor. The boy glanced at him, seeking reassurance, while the girl maintained her playful curiosity. He nodded, silently encouraging them to continue, and they did. Their confidence, combined with his steady guidance, seemed to impress the queen, whose attention lingered longer than before. After the exercises, she gestured for him to join her in a private chamber. This time, the atmosphere was different, intimate, and deliberate, yet still formal in its way. The children were allowed to stay nearby, but were engaged in quiet activities, giving him a sense of space to communicate directly with the queen. She began to speak through her glowing symbols and gestures. And though he could not understand her words directly, the intent was clear. She was acknowledging the bond that had developed, recognizing his dedication, and, in a subtle way, inviting him into a deeper connection with her family. He felt a mixture of surprise and warmth. The queen, who had once been distant and formal, now treated him with a personal regard that was gentle yet firm. Her gestures were careful, expressing gratitude and trust, but there was also an emotional layer that went beyond words. He realized slowly that her thoughts were turning toward him not just as a protector or guide for her children, but as someone who had earned a place in their hearts and lives. Later, as the sun began to set, he walked with the children through the palace corridors. Observing the play of light on the walls and the reflections in the polished floors, the boy laughed quietly, mastering a small puzzle he had struggled with before. While the girl clapped her hands in delight, her boldness tempered by the lessons he had taught. He encouraged their successes, offered gentle corrections where needed, and celebrated every small achievement. The queen followed at a distance, watching quietly. Her presence, a silent acknowledgement of his role and influence. By evening, the children were finally ready to rest. He guided them to their chambers, ensuring they were comfortable and at ease. The boy looked at him with gratitude, his trust in him unwavering. While the girl leaned into his side, a small smile on her face that spoke volumes. As they drifted into sleep, he remained nearby for a few moments. Reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point, the queen approached quietly, her presence calm yet commanding. She did not speak immediately, but her eyes conveyed a depth of emotion that words could not capture. Finally, she gestured for him to sit beside her. The children, now asleep, remained out of the room, leaving them in a moment of privacy. She communicated through a series of gestures and symbols, expressing gratitude, admiration, and something more, something personal that transcended the formalities of her role. He understood the meaning without needing words. She had observed his dedication, patience, and courage. She had seen how he had cared for her children, how he had guided them through challenges, and how he had earned their trust. And now, quietly and deliberately, she was inviting him into a deeper connection, not merely as a guardian, but as someone she could trust and rely on personally. The realization filled him with a profound sense of respect and humility. He had arrived on this world as an outsider, tasked with observation and minimal interference. Yet, through courage, empathy, and patience, he had become integral to this family's life. The bond he shared with the children was now mirrored by the queen's recognition of his place within their hearts and their home. Over the next few hours, they shared quiet moments together, observing the palace, the gardens, and the city beyond. Though they did not speak in a shared language, their gestures, expressions, and the subtle exchange of attention conveyed understanding and mutual respect. He realized that connection did not always require words. Sometimes it was built through trust, shared experience, and a willingness to care deeply for others. As night fell, the palace settled into a serene calm. The children slept peacefully, the attendants moved quietly through the halls, and the city outside glimmered under the alien stars. He sat beside the queen, feeling the weight of the past days and the significance of the moment. The journey that had begun with saving to frighten children had evolved into something far greater. He had become part of a family, a protector, a guide, and, in a quiet but undeniable way, a companion. The Queen's gaze met his, and in that silent exchange, a promise was made, not through words, but through understanding, trust, and mutual respect. He had been entrusted with the most important beings in her life, and in doing so, it demonstrated not only courage, but also the capacity for care, empathy, and commitment. Their lives were now intertwined in ways that neither of them could have anticipated when he first arrived on this alien world. The days that followed were filled with new experiences, lessons, and moments of joy. He continued to guide the children, helping them grow stronger, braver, and more confident. The Queen, increasingly comfortable in his presence, began to involve him in more aspects of palace life, seeking his counsel and valuing his judgment. The bond between them deepened, built on trust, shared responsibility, and the undeniable connection forged through care and courage in quiet moments. He found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. From a simple mission to observe and report, he had become a protector, teacher, an integral part of a family that spanned worlds. The children's laughter, curiosity, and growing confidence were a testament to his guidance, while the Queen's acknowledgement of his role and trust in him marked the evolution of their relationship. By the time the stars filled the sky once more, he understood that his life had changed forever. What had begun as an act of courage saving to children from danger had blossomed into a story of connection, trust, and unexpected bonds. He had discovered that bravery was not only in facing immediate threats, but also in caring for others, guiding them and earning their trust through consistent, selfless action. As he settled into his chamber for the night, he glanced toward the children's rooms. Their peaceful forms a reminder of the lives he had touched and protected. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that he had made a meaningful difference. And somewhere in the palace, he sensed the Queen's presence, her silent acknowledgement, her trust, and the beginnings of a deeper connection that promised companionship, understanding, and perhaps in time something more. He closed his eyes, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. It had begun with fear, uncertainty, and responsibility. It had evolved into trust, connection, and a profound sense of purpose. He knew that challenges still lay ahead. But he also knew that together with the children and the Queen, he could face whatever came next. Their lives were intertwined now, bound by courage, care, and the extraordinary journey that had begun with a single act of bravery. And as he drifted into a deep, contented sleep, he understood that he had found a place where he truly belonged, a place of trust, love, and connection that transcended worlds and species. The children were safe, the Queen's trust had been earned, and his life had been transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The story that had begun with saving two frightened children had become a tale of family, courage, and the quiet, enduring power of care and dedication.